Alright guys, going to do a little bit of maintenance work here today on the 92 F-150. You're only going to need two items, and those are a screwdriver and a permanent marker, and preferably a screwdriver like mine that has both styles of both a flat blade and a Phillips 4-way. Screwdriver tips, hence just the one screwdriver, otherwise you'll need two. Today I'm just going to be doing a new cap and rotor button on the truck. This one's got a couple years on it, and it's gotten to the point where the truck just won't run. After I took it apart and cleaned it the other day at work, it just will not run no more. So now let's get to it. It's a super simple thing. It's 10 minutes tops. So what we're going to start with is, you've already got your tools over here. So given that you still have yours in place, mine's just taken out for this purpose. Your air box, it comes from the, your tubing there, it comes from the radiator support brace back to your air box. It just snaps out, so go ahead and snap that out this time. Then you will need to take your screwdriver and loosen with the flat blade. You need to loosen two hose clamps, and then from there you can remove your air box. Alright, with the air box completely removed, now you will need your Phillips 4-way screwdriver. So in my case, I'll just flop this around and we're good to go. Now, the best way to do this, in case you don't know your firing order, which is readily available on Google, is to simply take your handy dandy Sharpie marker. Make sure you've got a clean surface to work on. And what you're going to do is you're going to sort these wires out. Now, every engine has its own firing order, and every engine starts out with, you have to find top dead center on number 1 cylinder before you can do any engine work usually. But in my case, number 1 cylinder wire comes to right here. So we remove that. If you notice, I have a 1 here and I have a 1 right here. Now those kind of get a little bit rubbed off if you don't have a good marker, hence the Sharpie and clean surfaces to work on. What you need to do is get your firing order, and your distributor runs clockwise, meaning here's number 1 cylinder, and it is always marked on your distributor as such. That way you always have that point of reference. Now in the case of these, pay attention to what side number 1 starts on. Now, I don't know, I've never had this to be different, but I'm not saying it can't be. It's this little plug here for whatever it is. I haven't figured it out, so if you know what it is, shoot me a message or drop it on the comments list. Now this is the new distributor cap, and proudly says made in USA. Brass terminals and contacts, that's a biggie for me. A lot of people don't mind using steel, but the steel is horrible for corroding up, and in 6 months to a year you get to replace it. Whereas brass, mine has been on there roughly 3 years-ish, somewhere in that ballpark, and just now gotten to the point where it doesn't want to run. And as far as it goes, I have no issues with BWD as far as parts go. The part numbers, if you want me to shoot those off real quick, is you have BWD select, whatever select is, and then you have part number C238, so that's Charlie 238, and then I have BWD for the CarQuest box. One came from Advanced, one came from CarQuest, but they're all under the same box store now. And as far as the rotor button goes, that number would be Delta 213P, and that way if you need to get these parts for your I guess it would cover a 1987 to 1986 Inline 6 4.9. Quick discussion on this. These are the steel setups that I was talking about. I don't care for them, but hey, it is what it is. The Motorcraft one, I'll have to figure out and find the part number somewhere. The part number for this one I'm not sure of, but the Motorcraft one is where this was $8 a piece. The Motorcraft one is $34.99, and this little fella is actually brass also to match the Distributor terminals, meaning longer life, better spark because of the conductivity. Overall, better parts, but this is what I've got to work with. So let's get to it. Now, once you've located number one spark plug, which oddly enough this does not show, that's an interesting little tidbit. The BWD distributor cap does not specify which one is number one, but if we made it up like so, you got the little black circle here, little snap-on thing. This is the number 4 plug, meaning this one is number 1. So we'll go ahead and make a mark on that so we know where we start at. And from there we got cylinder 1. That way we know where we start. Otherwise, you are going to never get it in the correct firing order. So there. So that we got that. I'll throw this up real quick. This is your firing order, starting at number 1, ending with number 4, in 1 clockwise rotation of the engine, and well, the distributor. In 1 clockwise rotation, you would go 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4, and that allows the engine to run correctly. From here, again, we need the Phillips 4-way screwdriver, and we need to loosen the 2 screws that's on each side of the cap. Being also careful to keep in mind your firing order, which now, since we already know the firing order and stuff like that, we don't have to mark it like I did. It's just redundancy, makes life a lot easier. But worst case scenario, you just trace the wire from whichever cylinder, you know, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over to the appropriate space, going in a clockwise fashion from the number 1 cylinder, and you should be good to go. So again, what we need to do at this point is remove the cap by loosening these 2 4-way screws. They're kind of a captive screw setup. They don't actually come out of the cap as much as they just release from the distributor base. Alright guys, now that we've got the cap removed, we can kind of do a little bit of show and tell, noting differences. You notice I got everything laid out here the way I need. Now the only thing I have left in the distributor to remove is the rotary button, which just slides out. Noting that there is only one way to put these in, and that is that little slot right there. And the way these work is that little slot holds it in place as this little fella makes its turns around inside the distributor cap. Now, I did clean this last night with a wire brush just to try to get home because it started spitting and sputtering at work. So it doesn't look that bad, but on close examination, you see this edge right there that's burnt looking? That's where you start getting your spark issues. Now, it had a bunch of corrosion that I cleaned off, but here's the new piece. And also inspect your parts before you get them home. Pull them out of the box right there in the store, and that way you make sure you know you've got your parts that are correct. You know, you can look at them, make sure they're the same. Now, this is the new BWD brand. This is the older one that I don't remember what name was on the box, to be honest with you. But as you can see, it is also with the brass connectors and terminals and stuff that, like I showed you. Now, nice, neat, and clean, noting that the brass is all intact. On this one, you notice right offhand something's not quite right with this. Let me turn it this way so you can see. See the score marks where the electrodes have worn down? It's basically all these are is electrodes. Yeah, you can see definitive scarring, and about 10 thousandths or 15 is cut out of each one, whereas there is all nice and squared off. So there, and the rotary button is non-spring loaded on the old one, whereas it is on the new one. So whatever difference that makes. But anyways, that is the old one. You can see I marked everything previously. So now we're starting on the reassembly of this thing. Alright, so now step one for reassembly. Take our rotary button and we slide it in place right on top of the little stump where the distributor goes. There we go, it's in place. So now we take the distributor cap, turn it where number one cylinder is the way it was before, noting this little black piece here was turned this way before. So we're going to put this in just like the other one, and that way that it all snaps together. Now these are really fine thread screws, so sometimes it takes a second to get them to go and set back in, but once you get the cap, you'll feel it just kind of snap in place. It won't actually hold itself, but you can feel it just kind of fall into the groove that's around it for it. And then take your 4-way screwdriver and then tighten these back down. Now don't tighten them down with a gorilla grip, but very, very firmly. That way that it keeps everything square and kosher. So after we do the 2 screws there tightening up, then that's when we'll go back to putting our spark plug wires back in the correct order. Alrighty, now this is step, I guess you'd say 2 or 3 depending on which way you started from, but anyways, now we're going to be routing our spark plug wires. Remember those notes we made on these of, you know, which one's which? It just saves the time of standing there going, you know, this one's right over to there, whatever. So we got number 1 spark plug going in a clockwise fashion, goes on number 1. Then we need the number 5 to go on here like so. Number 3 goes to here. Number 6 number 2 and number 4. Well, let's go up by there. Alright, number 4. Now, I want to show you something here I do, which is put a dab of dielectric grease in each boot. And what that does is it helps keep the spark inside, keep water outside of the boot, and not much, just a thin coating. It allows the spark to travel through, but it doesn't allow the water to get in and cause all kinds of mess. Now this is my coil wire. It goes right there. It just popped off, nothing big. Now, again, dielectric grease goes on both ends of the boots. That way that when you pull spark plug wires off, also never just pull the wire, just like you would never pull the wire for your extension cords and things like that nature at the house. You grab a hold of the boot itself and pull firmly, and you'll feel it unsnap. Or in the opposite, you'll feel it snap by using that. That way you don't put stress here and pull the little, I don't know what you call it, retainer clip, I guess you'd say, a little metal clip inside. That way you don't pull it out and have to go get new wires. Now, again, we got our handy dandy firing order sitting here looking at it. And we've got our coil wire put back on. Now that looks like a hot mess. Unfortunately, on an inline engine, you don't have many options as far as wire routing. Preferably, You don't want to have wires laying on top of each other in case they arc out. That way you don't have a misfire. Because even though they're rubber coated, little small imperfections in the rubber, just a pinhole is all it takes, and it can arc out against another wire, arc out against the engine, or like say a metal brace here, whatever. But from there, you should be golden. You should have your rotor button inside the distributor cap. Distributor cap turned and oriented the correct way with your firing order marked in a clockwise fashion, and the associated plug wire from the plug to the distributor cap in the correct place with the coil wire in the center providing spark. And from there you should be good to go for your first startup.